Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. Good Vok, Shavua Tov, a good week. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Saturday night? Maybe we're on a little earlier than expected. Hello, Melissa in Great Neck. And hello, Frank in San Pedro. Hi, I'm in Florida. Ella in Southern California. Welcome. Tonight's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by our own John Shore, Dr. John Shore, in memory of Charlie Kirk and in honor of the MS, the truth. Amen. We all need more truth in our lives and to be making and speaking and seeking the truth in our lives. Thank you for enabling us to share more truth with more people around the world. In the honor of that, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings, and we say amen. If you'd like to sponsor an episode of AT Daily, donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. It's a great time of year to be donating to charities that you care about. We're a nonprofit. Our mission is to share more Torah with more people around the world and to make it accessible to all without dumbing it down, as you know. And what was I going to say is, my friend Moshe Storch, who you listen to him every night during the 2-minute warm-up, he was Chazan today in our shul for Musaf, and at the end of davening, before we went to the Kiddush, we've been saying two Psalms, Psalm 121 and Psalm 130, ever since the war began. So for 2 years, at the end of every prayer service, we had Psalm 121 and 130 for the freedom, please God, of the hostages. Now we seem to be on the edge of it, right? The peace deal may be tentative, but it looks like it's moving forward, please God. We should have the end of this war with a secure and lasting peace and the release of all the remaining hostages. And so Moshe said something very beautiful, though, about this time of year that we're in right now. What were we saying over and over again between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year, right? And so our prayer, our teshuvah, our atonement, and our tzedakah, our giving charity, can avert a harsh decree, right? We say that over and over again in our prayers, especially on Yom Kippur. And so on Yom Kippur, there's the idea that, whatever our fate is for this coming year, it's been sealed, right? And whichever book we're written into, God willing, the book of life. But even though it's been sealed, it hasn't been delivered, right? It's been written, it's been sealed, but it hasn't been delivered. And as long as it hasn't been delivered, we can make a change. So we're still in a period where devotion to Torah, to prayer, to making hard plans, organized plans for how we're going to do better in the coming year can still change the decree. And our understanding, our sages teach that actually, yes, exactly, we can either slip, a note under the gates, so to speak. They closed on Yom Kippur, but we can still slip a note under the gates until Hoshana Rabbah. And some people say even all the way until the end of Hanukkah. But it remains a very propitious time for prayer, for self-examination, for making atonement, for growth, and for really meaning it, right? When we're learning and when we're teaching and when we're praying, finding a new level of sincerity and depth in this avoda, in this holy work. This is a beautiful time to do it because it's been signed and sealed, but not yet delivered. Okay. Let's get into it. Our daf tonight is page 18, and we got a good head start on page 18. Continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1 in chapter 2 here in Tractate Zevachim, the 29th volume of the Talmud. Let me just do a little reload here because something is fishy. There it is. Okay. Very good. I was only seeing Melissa's comment, but welcome Nancy and Joe and Joseph and Bella and Sharon. Okay. We're at the very bottom of page 18a. The sages taught if the priest's vestments were dragging on the ground or raised up. And we're talking about here in this first Mishnah that if an offering, even if it was brought properly with the correct intent, but there was something lacking in the priest who was bringing it, because one of the problems could be he was not wearing the vestments of a priest, or if he was the high priest not wearing the vestments of the high priest, that could disqualify the offering that he was bringing. Or if he was impure, or if he had been purified but had not yet completed his purification because he had immersed and was awaiting nightfall, or he hadn't brought his atonement yet, or all manner. I listed them yesterday, but I guess it's always good to review what our Mishnah says here. Right? What are some of the different shortcomings that would disqualify an offering brought by if he's an acute mourner, right, because he lost a relative that day, or if he did not wash his hands and feet in the special basin that priests had to use, or if he was an uncircumcised priest, or if he was sitting while he was bringing the offering, or if his feet were not on the floor. These are all matters that are important, that are necessary for the priest bringing the offering, and it would be disqualified if this was lacking. So now let's talk some more about the clothing. If the priest's vestments were dragging on the ground, or they were raised up far from the ground, or they were frayed, and the frayed, like thready, frayed, F-R-A-Y-E-D, then his service is valid because he's wearing the correct clothes. If they're just a little bit old and frayed or don't fit quite right, that will not disqualify the service. But if he wore 2 pairs of trousers or 2 belts, or if he was lacking one of the requisite vestments, or if he wore 1 extra vestment, or in a case where a priest had a bandage on a wound on his body, if he had a bandage on a wound on his body under his vestment, such that the bandage acted as an interposition between the vestments and his skin, or if he wore vestments that were soiled or ripped, and he performed sacrificial rites, his service is disqualified. Disqualified. Okay, so this modern fashion where young people will buy jeans that are pre-ripped, no good for a priest serving in the temple. They could be frayed, but they can't be ripped, they can't be stained. And interesting, he can't have a bandage on his skin that interposes between his skin and the vestments. All these will disqualify. Now we're on page 18b. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, if the vestments are dragging on the ground, they are fit, like unhemmed pants, I guess, that are too long. But if they are raised up above the ground, they are unfit. We used to call them floods or floodwaters when we were kids, pants that are too short. And the Gemara asks, but isn't it taught in the above Baraisa that even if the vestments were raised up, they are fit? So Rami Bar Chama says this is not difficult. Here the Baraisa deems them fit in a case where the priest raised them up by his belt, although they were initially the proper length. Okay, so if they're the proper size, but he's like pulling them up for some reason, maybe the floor is wet, that's okay. But if they were the wrong size to begin with and left too much of his skin exposed, then his service would not be fit if he brought a sacrifice. Right. And here, right, so Rambam says this is not difficult. Here the Baraisa deems them fit in a case where the priest raised them up by his belt. Although they were initially the proper length, there Shmuel deems them unfit in a case where they do not initially cover the priest's feet at all. Rav says in both this case and that case, whether they were dragging or raised up, they are unfit. The Gemara recounts, Rav Huna happened to come to Argiza, and the son of his innkeeper raised a contradiction before him. Did Shmuel actually say that if the vestments are dragging on the ground, they are fit, but if they are raised up above the ground, they are unfit? But isn't it taught in the Baraisa that even if the vestments were raised up, they are fit? So Rav Huna said to him, raise a contradiction from any source apart from this Baraisa, as Rami Bar Chama already answered that it does not contradict Shmuel's statement, as it applies only to vestments that were initially the proper length. So interesting that, Rav Huna was traveling and, he had a conversation with the son of the innkeeper who was, perhaps an aspiring Torah scholar, asked a question sincerely, and that conversation gets recorded in the Gemara, and here we are reading it almost 2,000 years later, at least 1,500 years later. And the Gemara asks, but wait a minute, maybe this kid has a point. Doesn't the Baraisa pose a difficulty for Rav, who deems the vestments unfit even if they were dragging? And if you would say, what is the meaning of the word dragging in the Baraisa? It means that they would initially drag, but they were raised up by a belt to the proper length. And they are fit since the belt effectively trims them. But then the term raised up in the Baraisa poses a difficulty. Why should the Baraisa deem raised vestments fit? If the Baraisa is referring to vestments that were initially the proper length and were then raised up by a belt, then shouldn't they be unfit as the belt trims them? Right? If you can take things that are too long, but then use the belt to raise them up, and that makes them okay, well then if you start with something that is the right length and you raise it up, shouldn't that make it no good when he's in that situation? How can you have it both ways? And Rabbi Zera says, Rav taught the Baraisa not as referring separately to both dragging and raised vestments, but as one statement referring to vestments that are simultaneously dragging and raised, i.e., dragging vestments that the priest raised up by his belt to the proper length are fit, but if they were above or below their proper height for any reason, they are unfit. New subject. The Rabbi Yirmiyah of Difti says the case of dragging vestments that the priest did not raise is the subject of a dispute between Tanaim, the sages of the Mishna. As it is taught in the Baraisa, the verse states, on the four corners of your garment. Why are we talking about the four corners of the garment? Right? So now we're going to enter a digression about tzitzits. Right, so we wear tzitzits. I have this garment here under my shirt. It's an arba confort. It's a four-cornered garment. It's basically like a rectangle with a hole in it, kind of like a poncho, but it has four corners. So it hangs, the front over my front, the back over my back, and then at each corner there is tzitzits, right? The ritual fringes. We also have them on our prayer shawls, on a tallis, but we don't walk around wearing our prayer shawl all day. We are commanded to have tzitzits on all our garments. In the ancient world, but all our garments means four-cornered garments. In the ancient world, it was typical to wear a four-cornered garment all the time. But in the modern world, where our clothes aren't four-cornered garments, religious men will wear this garment underneath or sometimes over, so that they are wearing tzitzis all the time. We wear it in the day, not in the night. So we've started talking about clothing and some of the requirements of the vestments of the priest, and now we're going to, learn out a little bit that affects the clothing of the priest from the laws of tzitzis, and we'll see how they intersect. So the verse states, on the four corners of your garment in Deuteronomy 22:12. And how does this relate to the vestments? It's going to take a while. Right now, we're going to talk about the requirements of tzitzis. Which garments require tzitzis? So, on the four corners of your garment, from which it can be inferred four, but not three. In other words, if you had a triangular poncho, that would not require tzitzis on its three corners. Four corners, but not three. A three-cornered garment is exempt from the obligation of tzitzis. One may ask, or perhaps it is only specifying four, but not five. When it says in the same verse, with which you cover yourself, a garment of five corners is mentioned as obligated. If so, how do I realize the meaning of four corners? That it means four, but not three. And what did you see that led you to include a garment of five corners and to exclude a garment of three corners? So I include a garment of five corners because it has four corners within it. A three-cornered garment doesn't have four corners, so we don't include it in the obligation of tzitzis. And it is taught in another baraisa that the verse states, on the four corners of your garment, from which it may be inferred four but not three, and also four but not five, i.e. only a four-cornered garment is obligated in the commandment of tzitzis. So Rabbi Yirmiyah continues, what? Is it not that these Tanaim disagree with regard to this? That one sage who deems a five-cornered garment exempt holds that an extra item is considered as though it exists and cannot be ignored, and the other sage who deems it obligated holds that it is considered as though it does not exist. The fifth corner is irrelevant. You have four corners on your garment, and that's why you're obligated in tzitzis. Accordingly, the first sage deems that a dragging priestly vestment unfit, since one cannot ignore the extra fabric, while the second sage deems it fit, because included within the pants that are too long, right, is pants that are the right size, whereas pants that are too short never fit properly. So the Gemara responds, no, everyone agrees that that an extra piece of garment is considered as though it exists. We don't ignore the extra. And therefore, dragging vestments are unfit. And according to the Tana, the second brisa, it is different here with regard to tzitzis, as the merciful one amplifies the law to obligate even five-cornered garments with the words, with which you cover yourself. So the Gemara asks, and the other sage who deems five-cornered garments exempt from tzitzis, what does he do with the verse, with which you cover yourself? And the Gemara responds, he requires it for a different teaching, namely that which is taught in a baraisa. The verse states, and it shall be unto you a fringe, right? A tzitzis, a fringe, that you may look upon it. That's Numbers 15:39. This is one of those laws where the reason for it is specified in the Torah. It's not a chok. Right, one of the super rational laws that we just do it because God said so, we can't understand the reason for it. It's not rational, fully rational in the sense that you can't have a society where people are permitted to steal and murder. You obviously need laws against that. But this is one where God tells you the reason for it. It can also be called a testimony, an eda. And what is that? He's telling you that the reason you're wearing fringes, the reason that you're wearing tzitzis, is so that when you look at the tzitzis, and we say this every day when we recite the Shema, in the third paragraph of the Shema, right? Spoke Hashem to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say, put a fringe on the corners of your garments, put a blue thread in the fringe, so that whenever you look at the fringe, you're reminded of all my commandments and not to explore after your heart and in your eyes, that you stray after them, right? So having the tzitzis on you is a reminder that you are obligated to be a holy people, obligated in all kinds of commandments. That it's our job to live by those commandments. That's a covenant that we have with God. Our ancestors signed on the dotted line. We didn't, but even they didn't sign, right? God held Mount Sinai over their heads and said, if you agree to be bound by the Torah, all's good. If not, this will be your funeral. And the people said, we're in. Okay, but that's something that we have for all time. And we understand that God did that because, maybe we wouldn't have agreed and we would have understood what a gift it is to be obligated. Of course, it's difficult. Of course, it takes work. Of course, it's a challenge. Of course, it's something that we need to be reminded constantly because our monkey minds are always straying all over the place. And we're all, as human and therefore pulled in all kinds of directions by our yetzer hara, by our evil inclinations. But being bound by the system of mitzvahs, Torah and mitzvahs, is a great gift to the Jewish people from God. And in fact, all people are bound by some of the commandments, the Jews by 613, and all human beings by the 7 Noahide commandments, which really include all kinds of Torah learning and other subcategories, etc. And so it's a gift to us from God that we have obligations before God. And the tzitzis are an ever-present reminder of those obligations. So let's keep reading here. Right, so the verse states, and it shall be unto you a tzitzis that you may look upon it. And the phrase that you may look upon it serves to exclude a night garment from the obligation of tzitzis. We don't wear our tzitzis at night. When we go to bed at night, we remove the arba kanfot. And why don't we wear the tzitzis at night? Because it's a reminder that you could see it, right? When you're in bed in the dark, you don't see it. And that's why you don't wear the tzitzis at night. That you may look upon it serves to exclude a night garment from the obligation of tzitzis, as the tzitzis on such a garment cannot be seen. Now, one might ask, or is it only to exclude the garment of a blind person who is unable to see the tzitzis? If the whole point of wearing the tzitzis is so that you see it, why does a blind person wear tzitzis? So is a blind person not obligated? Well, when it states in the verse with which you cover yourself in Deuteronomy 22:12, the obligation of tzitzis for the garment of a blind person is included. If so, how do I realize the meaning of the phrase that you may look upon it? It serves to exclude a night garment, right? Because Blind people may not be able to see, but they wear clothing, and since you cover yourself in clothing, they're obligated in tzitzits. But none of us have to wear it at night because in the dark you can't see the tzitzits. The Baraisa continues, and what did you see that led you to include the garment of a blind person and to exclude a night garment and not the reverse? Why not reverse those two interpretations? I include the garment of a blind person because it is at least visible to others, and I exclude a night garment because it is not visible to anybody, not the person wearing it, nor somebody else who would be in the room if it's in the dark. And the Gemara asks, and the other sage who derives that a five-cornered garment requires tzitzis from the phrase with which you cover yourself, from where does he derive that the garment of a blind person requires tzitzis? And the Gemara responds, he derives it from the word which, W-H-I-C-H, connecting word, in the phrase, as that term itself, right? So with which you cover yourself, right? With which you cover yourself. So the which, he's using that to include the garment of a blind person. He derives from the word which in that phrase, as that term itself connotes an amplification of the law. And the Gemara asks, and what does the other sage do with this word? And the Gemara responds, well, he doesn't interpret the word which as anything, just connective syntax. New subject, the sages taught with regard to the priestly vestments that the term linen, bad, in Leviticus 6:3, used in the verse indicates several properties of the garments, right? The linen vestments of a priest. So the verse states linen to indicate that they must be made of fine linen, boots, linen that they must be new, linen that their thread must be twisted of several plies, linen that their thread must be folded 6 times, linen that the priest may not wear non-sacred clothes along with them. Right? The priests wear only the priestly vestments, no other clothes. They have to be of the right quality, the right material, the right everything in their manufacture, as you would expect. I mean, they're serving in the holiest place on earth on behalf of the whole Jewish people and the whole world. And yeah, so there's a very specific uniform for that, and there's a lot of specifications about it in the Torah. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, granted the statement that they must be of fine linen is understood. This requirement teaches us that if they are of fine linen, they are fit, but if they are something else, they are not. But with regard to the statement linen, that they must be new, one can infer that if they are new, they are fit, but if they are frayed, they are not. But isn't it taught in the Baraisa that we just read earlier that even if they are frayed, they are fit? Right? If you're saying they need to be new, so then why is it okay if they're frayed? And Rav Yosef said to him, and according to your reasoning that the Baraisa intends to derive all these requirements from the word linen, such that all these requirements are indispensable, how can one understand the requirement linen that their thread must be folded 6 times? The word bad itself means each one on its own in Exodus 30 verse 34. So rather, this is what the Baraisa is saying. Those garments with regard to which it is stated linen must be made of fine linen, and they must be new and twisted, and their thread must be folded 6 times. Some of these requirements constitute a mitzvah ab initio, right, lechatila, meaning that you have to do it at the outset, but if you didn't do that particular aspect, it would still be valid. And some of them are indispensable, where if you didn't do that, then the service is disqualified. And the Gemara asks, from where is it known that this material, bad, is produced from the flax plant? Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says the verse is referring to an item that grows from the ground with each stalk on its own, bad bevad, i.e., it does not split into multiple stalks. The flax plant fulfills this criterion. And the Gemara asks, why not say that it is wool? And the Gemara responds, the individual wool fibers split into smaller fibers. And this would, not satisfy what we need here. So the Gemara rejects this, but flax also splits. And the Gemara answers, yeah, it splits, but only by being struck. Wool, by contrast, splits naturally. Ravina says that the identity of bad is derived from a different place. The verse states with regard to the priestly vestments, they shall have linen, in this case, pishtim, linen crowns upon their heads, and shall have linen breeches upon their loins. They shall not gird themselves with yaza. This is from Ezekiel 44:18, and the word pishtim is clearly referring to flax. Rav Ashi said to Ravina, but before Ezekiel came, right, that's from Ezekiel, so did we not know? I mean, Ezekiel was much later in Jewish history than the Torah. So how did they know? For hundreds and hundreds of years, there were priests serving first in the tabernacle and then in the temple. How did they know what to make the vestments out of if that was not clarified until Ezekiel came and gave his prophecy? So Rav Ashi said to Ravina, but before Ezekiel came, from where did we derive the identity of Bad? And Ravina responded, and according to your reasoning, one could ask the same of that which Rav Chisda said with regard to the prohibition against temple service by one who is uncircumcised or an apostate. We did not learn this following matter from the Torah of Moses, our teacher. We learned it from the words of Ezekiel, the son of Buzi. Quote, no stranger uncircumcised in heart or uncircumcised in flesh shall enter into my sanctuary to serve me. Until Ezekiel came, from where did we derive this? Rather, this law is learned as a tradition and therefore was observed for generations, and Ezekiel came and gave it support by writing a verse. Here, too, it is learned as a tradition, and Ezekiel came and gave support to it by writing a verse. Right, there was a continual priestly service done by the descendants of Aaron, the first Kohen Gadol, and his son. First the tabernacle in the desert, then the tabernacle and the land in the land of Israel, about 400 years. Then the first temple of Solomon, another 400 years. And all that time, there were certain, matters about how they do the priestly service that were simply handed down from the first priest to the next priest to the next priest, stretching all the way back to when Moshe showed Aaron how to do it in the wilderness. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the phrase in the verse, they shall not gird themselves with yaza? So Abaye said, they shall not gird themselves in a place in which people sweat. Mezein, so same root, as it is taught in a Baraisa. When they gird themselves with the belt, they may not gird themselves below their loins nor above their elbows, but rather at the level of their elbows. Okay, so they had, a little bit similar to what men will wear today, a gartel, right, which is just a belt that they put on when they're davening. And that belt, where does it sit? It could sit right above their waist, but sometimes it's higher. I actually wear mine higher than that. And so the priests had a belt. That was one of the 4 priestly vestments. And they didn't wear it low, right? It wasn't a low slung belt, just hanging on their hips. It had to be higher than that. Right? So basically between the hips and the elbows. Or about the level of the elbows. We're on 19a. So Rav Ashi says, Huna bar Noson said to me once, I was standing before Isgadar, the king of Persia, and my belt was raised above its appropriate height, and he lowered it into place, and he said to me, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, right? All Jews are members of a holy nation, a kingdom of priests. That is written about you. Therefore, you should always look dignified, right? So a king said to, I don't know if he was a sage, Huna bar Noson. Let's read about Huna bar Noson. Huna bar Noson, he was the exilarch, okay? So he was the head of the Jewish community in Bavel. And a contemporary of Rav Ashi. He was a student of Rava, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, a Maimar and Rav Papa, and he was also a close friend of Rav Ashi. And he was himself a renowned Torah scholar, and his statements appear in several places in the Talmud. It is possible that he was a relative or even a brother of Marimar, who occasionally served as a substitute for Rav Ashi, according to Igeris Rav Sherira Gaon. As exilarch and political leader of the Babylonian Jews on the one hand, and a great sage on the other, Rav Huna bar Noson was referred to as Torah and greatness in one place. As mentioned here, he had the favor of the king of Persia at that time, and still he considered himself to be subject to Rav Ashi and made this clear publicly. Some hold that when Rav Ashi died, Rav Huna bar Noson served for a short time as the head of the yeshiva in Rav Ashi's place. Right, so he was the political head of the Jewish community, but he was also a sage in his own right, and he enjoyed this close relationship with the king of Persia. Bavel was part of the Persian Empire at that time. So the king of Persia said to him, listen, the way you're wearing your belt isn't wrong. And the king himself adjusted his belt, showing what a close relationship they had. And when Huna bar Noson said this to Rav Ashi, he says, and when I came before a Maimar and recounted this incident, he said to me, with regard to you, God's promise to Israel, quote, and kings shall be your foster fathers, from Isaiah 49:23, was fulfilled. Now, with regard to the priestly vestments, we learn in our Mishna, elsewhere in Tractate Eruvin 103b, that a priest who was injured on his finger on Shabbos may temporarily wrap it with a reed so that his wound is not visible while serving in the temple. This leniency applies in the temple, but not in the rest of the country, as the reed also heals the wound and medical treatment is prohibited on Shabbos by rabbinic decree, unless it's a very serious injury, obviously to save a life, or if you could become close to, becoming a very grave physical threat, then we do whatever is necessary on Shabbos. But generally speaking, practicing medicine, taking medication and doing medical practices is prohibited on Shabbos by rabbinic decree. But rabbinic decrees don't apply to the priests in the Holy Temple. They have their own rules because they're more expert in what they need to do in the Holy Temple. So they could put a reed. Now, that's not interposing between them and the vestments because the vestments don't cover their hands. But if his intention is to draw blood from the wound, then it is prohibited both here and there. That would be too much, even in the Holy Temple, for a priest on Shabbos. So Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, says they taught only that a reed is permitted, but a small sash, a tziltzul, as a bandage is considered an extra garment and is therefore forbidden, since it is prohibited for a priest to add to the priestly vestments described in the Torah. And Rabbi Yochanan says, they said that wearing extra garments is prohibited only if the extra garment is worn in a place on the priest's body where the requisite vestments are worn. But if the sash is in a place where on his body where the vestments are not worn, for example on his hand, it is not considered an extra garment. The Gemara challenges this and says, and let Rabbi Yochanan derive that a sash is prohibited because it acts as an interposition between the priest's hand and the sacred vessel that he grips. Right? Why is it okay on his hand if it's now going to interpose between him and the vessels that he's carrying, like for instance if he's collecting the blood of an offering, which would disqualify the service. But the Gemara rejects this challenge. Rabbi Yochanan is referring to a case where the wound is on the priest's left hand. Since the entire service is performed exclusively with his right hand, a bandage on his left hand is not an interposition. Alternatively, the wound is on the priest's right hand, but not in a place used for the service, such that the bandage does not interpose between his hand and the sacred vessel. It could be on the back of his hand. And Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with the opinion of Rava, as Rava says that Rav Chisda says in a place on the priest's body where the vestments are worn, even one extra thread interposes and is prohibited, whereas in a place on his body where the vestments are not worn, if the fabric is 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, it interposes. But if it is less than that, it does not interpose. And then we've learned elsewhere that something that is, 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, right, like a square about that size, smaller than that is not considered a garment at all. It's not a significant piece of fabric. Larger than that, it is. We know that that because clothing can contract saras, but if it's smaller than that, it can't. And the Gemara notes Rav certainly disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that fabric of any size that is in a place on his body where the vestments are not worn is not considered an interposition. Shall we say that he also disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, who deems any sash an interposition, even one smaller than 3 by 3 finger breadths? And the Gemara responds, even according to Rava, a small sash is different, as it is significant and it is therefore considered a garment, even if it is less than 3 by 3 finger breadths. I am almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. even if it is less than 3 by 3 fingers. Some say that there is another version of the dispute. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, says that they taught only that a reed is permitted, but a small sash interposes. And Rabbi Yochanan says they said that an item acts as an interposition when it is less than 3 by 3 finger breadths, only in a place on the priest's body where the vestments are worn. But in a place where on his body where the vestments are not worn, the following distinction applies. If the fabric is 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, it interposes, but if it is less than this, it does not interpose. And this is the same ruling that Rava says that Rav Chisda says. The Gemara suggests, let us say that Rava disagrees with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chia, who deems any sash an interposition, even one smaller than 3 by 3 finger breadths. And the Gemara rejects this. This is not necessarily so, as a small sash is different, since it is still significant. It is therefore like a vestment, even if it is smaller than 3 by 3 finger breadths. And the Gemara raised a question, and according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, why does the Mishnah teach the law specifically with regard to a reed? Let the Mishnah teach us that a priest may wrap his wounded finger with a small sash, since this would teach the greater novelty that although a sash is significant, it does not constitute an interposition. And the Gemara responds, it teaches us a matter in passing, that a reed applied to a wound helps to heal that wound. Okay, I'll take a couple of questions, and then this is what I want. And then tomorrow, Sunday, we should be having class at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Then it's going to be Erev Sukkot on Monday. Right, let me double check that. Yeah, Erev Sukkot is Monday. So we will be having class at noon, right, the usual time before a holiday starts on Monday. We'll post this on the Facebook page, but we'll have a noon class on Monday, and then we won't have class on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we will, probably go... Yeah, then we'll be having our regular schedule on Thursday, Chol HaMoed. God willing, I'll be able to teach the class from the Sukkah. But whatever, the important thing is tomorrow, regular time, and Monday at noon, special pre-holiday time. Okay, Sharon, the specific strings, knots, and threads of tzitzis numerically represents all the mitzvahs. But I always thought that the 4 corners represented the 4 corners of the earth, especially because the words we say before the Shema speaks of gathering in the exiles from the 4 corners when that is being done. Hurry, please, and gather us from the 4 corners of the earth. Interesting. I don't think I've heard that before, that the 4 corners alludes to the 4 corners of the earth where the exiles will be gathered from. But there is this sense when we talk about 4 corners, when we wave the lulav, we wave it in 6 directions, which include up and down, because we live in a 3-dimensional world. But we essentially live in a 2-dimensional world in terms of covering the surface of the earth. And we think of that, like you're saying, Sharon, right, the 4 cardinal directions, right? North, south, east, west. And that alludes to the whole world, right? So maybe there is an allusion to that in the 4 corners. I like that. Joe, in the military at morning muster, the troops are inspected to make sure that every aspect of their uniforms are up to snuff. With such a ritual part of the start of each day, was such a ritual part of the start of each day for the priests in the temple. It would make sense to prevent issues rather than dealing with them after the fact. What a great observation and question. I don't know. I feel like I want to do a little research on that. I bet you're right. Because we did learn elsewhere that there was some hierarchy among the priests serving in the temple, right? There was a high priest, we know that. There was a deputy high priest who didn't really do anything except he was ready to step in if the high priest becomes incapacitated for anything. That's his job. But then there was another guy. I forget what the term for him was. But he was like the one who was running the priests, right? He was like the administrator of the priests. And I bet that his job was to look over the priests and their vestments and to make sure everything, was ship shape. I'm sure you're right. It just wouldn't make sense otherwise. And I bet that was part of the duties of that fellow. What was he called? I can't remember what the name of that office was, but it was basically the administrator of the priests. And I'm sure he was doing that. But I need to, look into it a little bit more. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we're together again tomorrow, Sunday, regular Sunday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night. Shavua Tov. Good vach.